Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, President Bola Tinubu has concluded his visit to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where he joined other African leaders to participate in the Mission 300 Africa Energy Summit. The president and his team arrived in Nigeria and is now arrived in Tanzania on Sunday, but is now back to Abuja. The two-day summit hosted by the government of Tanzania in collaboration with the African Union, the African Development Bank, and the World Bank Group adopted the Dar es Salaam's declaration. The declaration focused on providing access to electricity for 300 million people in Africa by 2030. A high point of the event was the presidential endorsement of the Dar es Salaam Declaration by African leaders at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center. Following the reading of the declaration, leaders from Nigeria, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, and Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritania, Niger, Senegal, Tanzania, and Zambia signed the document. Though the declaration, the leaders from 12 countries expressed their commitment to ensuring electricity access for their citizens in the next 5 years. Let's talk to an energy analyst. He's also a lawyer and partner with Bloomfield Law Firm. No other person. He's also an author, Dr. Ayodele. Doc, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
I think it's the first time this year.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic
Great to see
studio
you.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming in here.
Yeah.
Well, let's start this conversation looking at 300 million people is the target. Looking at the continent and what's been happening. And I don't want to use the word, let me just say energy poverty, one way or the other that we've faced. What do you think about this move by these leaders?
Okay, the challenge with this part of the world, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, is that we don't even have a vision more often than not. So it's good that there is a vision. It's good that there's something to look forward to now. So I think it's a good thing. Now, there's always the debate between access and affordability, right? So if you want to give access, would it necessarily be affordable, particularly in the interim? That's a big question. So I think access, yes, we've got what it takes. Africa is the most, is about the most prosperous when it comes to natural resources, whether you speak to gas, whether you speak to even renewable energy sources. So I think if they walk the talk, we can make a lot of progress.
What are the options? What options do we have? We know that this, for example, let's stay with our country, Nigeria. We know that the grid cannot satisfy everyone. What are the options for these African countries?
Okay, interestingly, when you speak to distributed generation, using renewable solar home systems, all of those are options for people. It may be expensive initially. That's why you then begin to talk about getting support from multilateral lending agencies such as the AFDB, the World Bank, the IFC, those guys. Renewables can be one thing, but one thing more importantly is even energy efficiency and ensuring that we cut waste. More often than not, the challenge is even, part of the challenge is inefficiency and waste. So I think that African countries need to also, our leaders, not necessarily Nigeria, leadership needs to be more focused and to at least reduce corruption in terms of funds being diverted. If you reduce that by a reasonable percentage, then you're able to properly channel those funds into creating energy wealth, energy prosperity. So our options are enormous. We've got water, we've got hydro, we've got solar radiation, particularly when you go to the north. We've got a lot of gas. And I always say it's not sufficient that you have the base resource. You must be able to process it and convert it to useful or usable forms. So let's use our gas. Let's not necessarily jump on the wagon. We need to think about transition. But you find out that even some of the biggest IOCs are rolling back their plans. Bank of America has left some organization, I don't remember the name, for around transition. People are rolling back with Mr. Trump, who wants to drill.
Trump.
Yeah, we need to further exploit what we currently have. Gas. We're gas province, like people say, with some oil. You know, our non-associated gas and associated gas are almost the same, the reserves, almost the same quantity. So let's put everything into having a robust energy mix, and we can make progress. Maybe initially a bit expensive, but with time and with opening it up to the market. And I said that the president is someone who is market driven. He thinks about the market, right? So if we leave it to the market with very little intervention, particularly for the most vulnerable, we find out that there will be different people will be creative. And once you have huge numbers, it's market forces of demand and supply. Once you have huge supply, of course, prices are going to go down. Ultimately.
Let's look at rural electrification agencies and what they are supposed to do. Many talk about it, and we hear they get funding, just like we've seen the AFDB promising another round of amounts. Okay, like what I have here, AFDB $1.1 billion expected to provide electricity for 5 million people. That's by the end of 2026. There's also a $200 million for Nigerian electrification project to provide electricity for 500,000 people by the end of 2025. Like you talked about this. This funding, we hear about this amounts, this money is coming in. How do we properly manage and channel it so that we make sure that they are evaluated and monitored? And these people in the rural areas, because we still have people in Nigeria that don't have light. There is no electricity supply at all.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's happening.
Yes.
So how do we make sure that they don't continue to suffer this?
Okay, so two things. First, you'd have to appreciate that grid extension to certain places are not economically viable, or it's not economically viable.
Considering what we even have now with the band A, band B,
exactly.
band C thing.
So it's not economically viable to get to certain places. And to be fair to the rural electrification agency, they're doing quite a bit in the last 10, 15 years. To be honest, there have been issues around corruption and certain people losing. So it's first checks and balances. First, what's your policy, overall overarching policy, and then people can begin to plug into those policies. We've got policies here and there. We just need to ensure that there is some form of alignment, and then there are checks and balances, so that when these funds come. Another thing that the world is doing is result-based financing, so that there are you give them results they have to achieve, and then you finance based on those results. And I see that already happening with Damilola Ogunbiyi's organization. I don't remember that organization now.
I think she used to
so they are doing results. Used to be with REA at some point. It was Lagos State at some point. So already they are supporting with financing, but it should be result based. You have certain results you have to achieve at certain periods. Once you achieve them, that financing comes. 1. 2, we need to work more with companies such as NG, and I don't want to mention more names because I'm not advertising. You need to work with guys who do solar home systems and who help with rural electrification. You see a number of things done by the REA, like electrifying universities. So in areas where it's not economically viable, you're not extending the grid because we can't afford it at the moment, or wouldn't make sense ultimately. Then distributed generation. Now, that will even help those rural guys to even themselves be financially, it will make them to be able to stand on their feet financially for whatever petty trade they do. Imagine spending, you would have seen a few situations where Babas buy those small generators, and after a while, they close shop because they're spending 40% or more on generating electricity. And I know there have been a lot of moves by different organizations to have arrangements where solar panels, and those ones are getting cheaper. As China produces more, as you have more competition, they're getting cheaper, they last longer, they are getting better quality. Yes, and artificial intelligence. People are even beginning to adopt artificial intelligence for all of those things. We just need to, it's that we have bits and pieces here and there, and each time a new government comes in, if there's ongoing policy, things change. Let's align policies. Let's check when people get funds, do they use those funds? Let's use a results-based financing that you have to achieve this, we give you this amount. Let's also pay contractors directly. So if you need to build a 5 megawatt plant, whether it's hybridized so that a combination of gas and solar, do not give the money necessarily to that agency. If there's a way you can pay contractors that have been shortlisted, and you ensure that their contractors are well known to do that sort of project, you pay them directly. That's why some of these refineries are working, because contractors were paid directly. So I think we need to rethink our model. Because our problems is not that we don't have brilliant people or we don't have brilliant policies. And I think the president is doing quite well around energy. No one is going to tell you the president isn't doing really well with respect to energy. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of policy work, there's a lot of thought put behind it, there's a lot of documents, initiatives, investment tax allowances, credits, all of those incentives to ensure that, and that brought Bonga's $5 billion investment, Bonga North. All of those, and the $6 billion is mentioned. A number of divestments, to indigenous companies, and the fact that they can get approval very quickly, regulatory approval means that they can then invest also in gas. Because regardless of what we say, I think data I saw for 2023, 79.4% of our power generation was still from gas.
True.
Hydro was 20.4 something. So it means that gas is still critical. Whatever we say, gas is critical. Whether guys are doing virtual pipelines such as CNG, LPG, whatever means, or they are doing pipeline in the real sense, gas remains critical. We've got sunlight. Let's use that sunlight. Solar radiation. Let's use it. Waste. There's so much we can do, particularly for those who do not even require so much in the rural areas. Require so much power
to charge their phones, put the bulb on, and all of that.
Yes. So it's just for government to ensure that when you have policies such as tax waivers, import duties, duty exemptions, those things work when it's time to now get it. Because if, for example, and I'll give you an example, you say there's an import duty waiver, but you pay a percentage of what you'd have paid. You've given me a waiver, but you've taken a lot of that money away from me ultimately. You understand? If the fees, the charges are huge, it then makes nonsense of the waiver in reality. So it's brilliant what the president is doing, what he's saying. He's got brilliant advisors, but everyone else who is working to implement needs to sit tight and do their implementation.
Sometimes I ask that questions when we talk about trade facilitation in some cases, and we're talking about making so much profit. Are we really facilitating trade or aiming to make more profit? Because you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Because you need to allow for solar panels and all of that.
Import duties and encourage even local production.
There's so much on the high side.
If local production cannot meet demand, then let people import and even give them import duty exemptions. For the local guys, provide cheap funding. For them, provide cheap funding, provide land, make it easy. Right of ways, tough, difficult to get, particularly in a place like Lagos. So you need to ensure that from a regulatory standpoint, it's not too difficult, it's not too expensive, and then it encourages people. But I'm always of the view that let there be free trade. Whilst you're encouraging the local people, let people be able to import, particularly where you can't meet demand. See what happened with last administration when they shut the borders. Things went haywire, right? It may have balanced out later, but if those guys locally had sufficient capacity, there was a lot of capacity put into them before shutting the borders, then the impact wouldn't have been that. You have to supply them seeds, fertilizers in huge quantities, more than what they need, then shut the borders. But not the other way around. Shut the borders, and then prices go up. Same for solar.
It's really an interesting conversation here. But now let's back to this agreement and all of that. Moving forward, for example, again, let's stay with our country, Nigeria. Many have identified the issue of transmission, increasing the megawatts of electricity. For example, a country like South Africa, less number of people, and you generating about 60,000 or 70,000 megawatts of electricity. And they're not up to 200 million people in Nigeria. They are less than 100 million, I think.
Less than half of our population.
Half of our population. We can also go to other countries. You know what I'm talking about. So where do we start from? Talking about this missing link. Is there something more that can be done around the transmission end? So that, because at the end of the day, you hear, we are winning out social powers. We are not, you know what I'm talking about, Dr. Oni.
Okay, so the fun thing is with the Electricity Act, states, subnationals can now create their own market. That's true. About 14 of them are already taking those steps. In fact, what you and I should be doing is telling the governor of Lagos that, I mean, he's got a second term, but let's say we have a new one. We're not giving you a second term if you don't have electricity. Yes, because if you've taken over the market, then it's your responsibility. Remove politics, ensure the right people are there, ensure that you do not intervene, make sure that you create the enabling environment. There is a huge market here. Look at the betting industry, just giving people hope. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry in Nigeria. So do same for electricity. Make it easy for people to come in. People will pay, and people will learn to manage usage, and ultimately everyone makes money.
At the end of the day?
Yes. So subnationals, you and I ask your governors that question, and forget about the greed to a large extent. I do not believe in balkanization, but to a large extent, that's what federalism does. What federalism does is a state is allowed to develop at its own pace. The weaker states are then assisted by the federal government. That's the way it should be, right? So Lagos, Enugu, Imo, Ekiti, Ondo, Delta, Edo, those states, I'm not sure Delta has, Edo, a number of states say we can grow it. Yeah, I mean, then they do it. They just need to ensure that their state is attractive. If there's political interference, no one's going to want to invest. If policies keep changing, no one's going to want to invest. So that's what it is. And then we should ask those governors, in 3 years, why you want to return if we don't have electricity?
Almost finally, you talked again about access and affordability. Steady power supply, it's not really cheap, Dr.
No, it's not. It's not, because there's a cost to producing it. If it's you've got at least two costs: a capex, capital expenditure, and operating expenditure. You're going to pay salaries to the guys who are managing. You're going to buy the turbines.
Of course.
And you're going to buy the balance of plant or whatever it is initially. Are you not going to recover that money? You are going to recover that money unless you wear charity. So that's what it is. So if you are doing rule of thumb, a used power plant, $600,000 per megawatt. If you want to do 10, that's $6 million. If you want to do 20, that's $12 million. So it's never going to be cheap, but can ultimately be affordable. And affordability will work with efficiency. Part of the reasons why we have issues with tariffs in Nigeria, particularly for the band day, why people are screaming, is that we're also paying for inefficiency, as far as I'm concerned, regardless of what anybody says.
I agree. And
I said to a NEC commissioner once that our tariffs are higher than what you'd see even in places like Canada. I know for a fact. Yeah, he did say they have a lot of hydro, but that's not completely true. If you leave Manitoba off, there's a lot of gas too.
Gas.
Yes, so
and the gas guys, they want their money. The big boys, they want the money.
So it's two things. Deal with inefficiency. Let's do an economic merit dispatch arrangement. You find out that people are going to look for a way to cut cost, even their operating and capital expenditure. I think those are critical. It can't be cheap, but it can be affordable over time. Looking forward.
What's your parting shot with regards to that conversation? It's a very interesting one, honestly. I wish we could just continue. But what's your take? How well do you see these leaders achieving this moving forward?
Some states will succeed. When I say states, I mean countries. Like but not everyone will. If you don't have democracy and you're not sure who the next person is, and you really can't say if there's no consistency. The average businessman would rather bad laws, but there's consistency. He knows how to structure his deal than continuous change. He would like continuous change if it's continuous improvement to ensure that more people come and invest. You give them tax breaks and all of that, they would love it. But not change the laws in a manner that is detrimental to the businessman. Make your country attractive. You find people come in and do business. That's it.
Dr. Oliloni is an energy analyst, lawyer, partner at Bloomfield Law Practice. Thank you so much. Like I said earlier, he's also an author. I really appreciate you coming to the studio. Thank you so much. Really nice having you here.